Lisa.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa Steinke, and my co-author Liz Fenton can't be here tonight, so I'm going to get to talk lots of trash about her. Just don't tell her what I said. We've been friends for over 30 years and have written 7 books together. Our most recent was How to Save a Life. It's a dark, heart-pounding love story with a Groundhog Day twist. And we're really excited to be hosting Rachel Beanland tonight, along with Julie from Warwick's. Julie, you want to take it away?
I will. And Rachel, welcome. We're so glad that you're here with us. So thank you for spending the late afternoon with us here in San Diego. Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, I see some of our great regulars that always are here. So thank you all for being here. And Holly's just telling us that she finished How to Save a Life last night, which is Liz and Lisa's newest book, and she loved it.
Thanks,
So,
Holly.
yeah. So, and that's, usually I talk about how to get books from Warwick's and, which any way there is to get a book, you can get it from Warwick's. Let's just put it that way. We are open for business if you want to come and browse. We're located in La Jolla, San Diego, California. But since we're kind of in a voting season, I've sort of changed up my little PSA a little bit and want people to know that, yes, we're in a voting season, but you also can vote with your dollars. And when you are wanting an author to write another book, it's really important to buy that author's books. And so use your dollars. I know that we're in a pandemic. I know that we're in a financial crisis, but if you're going to buy a book, hopefully you'll buy it from an independent bookstore and you'll buy it from Warwick's. But it's really important to support authors and support their work and their art and what they give to us as readers. So that's my little PSA. And so I'm going to be behind the scenes. I'm going to go off screen, Lisa, so that I can do my thing. And that'll just be you and Rachel on the screen together. And I can pop in with questions if you want, or do you want to look at those from the audience?
Yeah, I can. If I see any in the chat, I think I can multitask, but if I miss one, feel free to jump in and tell me.
All right. Well, you guys have a great conversation.
All right. Thanks, Julie. Well, welcome, Rachel. This is Rachel Beanland, and she is with us tonight. We're really excited. Her debut, Florence Adler, Swims Forever, just came out. So welcome.
Thanks. Thanks so much for having me.
I'm just going to read your bio, and then I will launch into the questions. Rachel Beanland writes fiction and essays and is the author of the novel Florence Adler, Swims Forever, which was published by Simon & Schuster on July 7th. Her essays have appeared in Creative Nonfiction and Broad Street, among other places. She has an MFA in creative writing from Virginia Commonwealth University and holds bachelor degrees in art history and journalism from the University of South Carolina. Before turning to writing full-time, Rachel worked in public relations and nonprofit management. Again, welcome. So Florence Adler Swims Forever has been on, I think, every list. I was researching you today, and it's like, I don't think there was a list you didn't make, so congrats. But Good Morning America, Parade Magazine, and then Rebecca Mackay, a Pulitzer finalist for The Great Believers, said about your writing, she simply tells one hell of a story. That's a great compliment.
I'm very appreciative.
So tell us what your book is about.
Yeah. So pull it up. Voila, Florence Adler Swims Forever. It is a book that it's set in 1934 Atlantic City, and it follows the Adler family, which is a Jewish family, very close-knit, as they are kind of going through an unspeakable loss. In the beginning of the book, this is not giving anything away, it's in the flap. Florence Adler returns from college. She's intent on swimming the English Channel by summer's end, and she drowns while she's out on a training swim off the coast of Atlantic City. And so the family really struggles to make this decision about what to do with the fact that her older sister is in the hospital on bed rest. She has lost a baby the previous summer, and so she's pregnant again. And the family, and in particular, the matriarch, Esther, worries that, if she discovers that her sister has died, she'll risk another pregnancy loss. And so the family kind of comes together to keep this secret from Fanny, who's in the hospital. And this is kind of what happens that summer as they do that. It's based on a true story, which took place in my family. And so that was kind of the inspiration for the book. But yeah, that's a little bit about it.
Well, you said it's based on a true story from your family. And I also read that, you had this idea to turn that into a book for quite a long time. And I'm just curious, like, what finally made you decide to do it?
Yeah, so I had always grown up hearing the story about my grandmother and her experience, on the beach in Atlantic City. She was a little girl when her aunt drowned. And she remembered one of her earliest memories was watching her aunt's body be brought back up onto the beach. So it had just a really, scarring effect on her as a young girl. And it was something she didn't like to talk about much. But when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s, my mother would tell me this story. And the story, by the time I was hearing it, this was, of course, like 60 years after Florence's death, had really kind of shifted its focus. It was less about the fact that Florence had died, which was, of course, very sad. And it was more about what kind of a strong woman Esther must have been. This is my great-great-grandmother. I'm just calling everyone by character names. So
Right. I was just about to ask you, did you use their real names?
I used some, but not others. So it's
okay.
Just character names.
Yeah.
But the story kind of had become about what a strong woman Esther must have been to walk into that hospital room and act like everything was okay and to just keep up the charade. And when I would hear that story as I was growing up and as I was a young adult, I always kind of questioned it. Like my mother and her sisters and her mother came down very much on the side of like, yes, Esther did the right thing. This is the only way to do it. You, of course, would not, keep this, you would not tell this piece of terrible news to someone who was in the hospital on bed rest. And I just kind of remember thinking like, well, what if she had wanted to know, this is my great grandmother who was in the hospital bed. What if she had wanted to know? What if, she really felt like people were completely controlling her life and didn't like it. And so the fact that we had kind of such different takes on this story made me always kind of think that there was a little something there. And so when I kind of reached my mid-30s and was ready to really like officially try to write my first novel, I had kind of dabbled before. But when I was thinking about, what I would write about, that story was just the story that wouldn't leave me alone.
Right. Well, so it took, you said 1930,
so the
what was it?
The real story happened in 1929, and I set the book in 1934. And I had a couple of reasons for doing that, but yes,
gotcha.
That is when it's set.
What kind of research, I know this is based on a family story, but what kind of research did you have to do for just the time period and kind of put the reader in that place?
Yeah, I did a ton of research. I mean, what's funny is that I never grew up going to Atlantic City. My grandparents were the last generation to be raised there. My mother remembers going back and visiting her grandparents, but she didn't live there as a child. So while I grew up hearing a lot of stories about my grandparents, years in Atlantic City, they were quite distant. And Atlantic City is one of those places that has changed so much since the 30s that I almost had to start from scratch. Like I had a couple of interviews I'd done with my grandparents where they told me, oh, this is where we used to get penny candy or whatever. But it would never have been enough for a book. So I definitely did a deep dive into research for this book. And I never really set out to write like a research-driven book. It just kind of found me. And so I became a researcher. But Atlantic City ended up being a really wonderful place to research because it's almost like a city stuck in a time capsule. It was at such a height in the 30s, and there were so many people from all over the country that were visiting Atlantic City to go on vacation. At the time, it was called America's Playground. And And maybe they still call themselves that, I'm not sure, but it, you know, it was really true at that point. And there were postcards and there were tourist guides and there were people would get their photographs taken on the boardwalk. And there were just all kinds of little, you know, souvenirs and ephemera that people would take from Atlantic City and take home with them all across the United States. So when I went to go start researching, if I wanted to Google, you know, the name of a hotel that was around in the 30s or a pier or a store, I almost always could find it because somebody somewhere had posted an old postcard or an old photograph. So between all of the things that I could find, and then you can kind of see in the background, I have this map that I blew up on foam core. And it's an old map from the 20s. And I would put pins in it for all the locations. So between the map and all these images that I was able to find, I really could do kind of a nice job of juxtaposing the two. So that was a tremendous help. I also visited archives and did kind of more nitty gritty research, but that's a little bit about the process.
I love the research process. I mean, our books are not, you know, hugely researched. There are a lot just from our, you know, up here, but I love the research process. But I find myself like, did you fall down the rabbit hole with it? And was it hard to decide what to include and what not to include?
It really is because, you know, I mean, they have that expression about writing, like your research is showing, like I would find these really cool things and I wanted to put them all in the book, but if I had, it would have just been a book of really cool things that didn't have a narrative arc.
Right.
So I think like part of the trick is knowing when to hold back. And, you know, an example that I always give about like when to hold back is there's like one little throwaway line in the book where I talk about baby cages. And, you know, I just mentioned that the hotel that Stewart's family runs has these baby cages. And of course, if you actually Google baby cages, you'll spend like 3 hours on the internet. I mean, people were attaching cages to like high rises and letting their babies go sit outside. It is like terrifying.
Right.
But that's an example of something where like I could have easily written a scene with a baby cage and I had to hold myself back.
Yeah, to have self-restraint. Did you find from doing that research that you might set another book in the past like that?
Definitely, I think, yes, absolutely. I'm not afraid of doing historical, you know, research or writing anymore. Like I think it felt intimidating the first time around, and now I know there's a plan of attack. There's a way to do it. And so I definitely think that I will, you know, I don't think I will only write historical fiction, but I'm not afraid of it. And then people ask like, well, do you think there are more books in Atlantic City? You know, I mean, because Atlantic City remains an interesting place for years after. And I think that's even possible. You know, I'm not working on a sequel right now, but I could see following the Adler family, you know, into the future. So who knows?
I've never been to Atlantic City. Did you go?
I did go on a research trip, and there are some things that are still there, like the Knife and Fork Inn is still there, and I visited so Florence Adler is based on Florence Lowenthal and my family, who was the girl who drowned, and I visited her grave, and I you know, there are a couple of the hotels are still there, or that, you know, they've kind of morphed over time, but you can kind of see the bones are still there. But of course, a lot of places have been torn down to make room for other casinos.
Right.
So it's very, very different, but I did go.
I love that. I really like historical fiction. I like reading it. So I'm always have a lot of questions about that. But
I think right now in our current era, it's like really nice to get away, you know?
Yeah. Like, yeah, exactly. Anybody else's time period, please. I'll even take like 2 years ago. You know, give me a good 2018 novel and I am in. I am set for life. So you knew you had the story for a long time. You finally sat down to write it, but then it took you a little bit because you're raising 3 kids at the same time. So tell us a little bit about like when you would write and then what that process was like to get it from beginning to end.
So I'm like one of these crazy people who sets my alarm really early and does all my writing early in the morning. And particularly back then when I was working on this novel, I had to be especially strict with myself. I was, at the time I started working on this novel, I was working full time and I had 3 kids. And I still have 3 kids, but I'm not working full time anymore. But there was really no time. I mean, do you have kids?
Yes. So
Like,
I feel you on that.
like, I mean, and you're running them around and you're trying to get them out the door and you're late for work and like, all of it. It's just, it gets crazy. And so the only way I could figure out to do it was just setting my alarm super early. So I would wake up and I would write the book from 4:30 to 7 a.m. every day. And I did that 7 days a week and even weekends. And I would go, and then I would go get on with my day. So, in that format, it took me 2 years to write the book. And luckily now I have a little more time, but that was, I mean, it got it done, I can almost like do the math and just figure out like, okay, I write this many pages a day,
And the kids get up, and they're like, I just want breakfast. They have no idea.
I know.
Been up for all,
And I love the quiet morning hours. Like, I mean, now I'm in a position, now it's a little weird because of COVID, like my kids are in my house still and it's different, but I have a little more time during my day, but I have found that I still set my alarm. I'm not doing 4:30, I'm doing 5 because I'm being generous.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Still a little early, but there's a whole 5 a.m. writers club. Have you found it on Twitter?
No.
A whole group of people over there. You might want to like connect. Although that might keep, I don't know how they stay motivated if they're
if you're
tweeting,
on Twitter at 5 a.m., you're maybe not writing.
I think it's supposed to be a motivational thing, and then they go off their separate ways. But it's like, I'm here with you. Okay, bye. That's how I envision it, but I'm not up at 5, so I can't really tell you.
I will research this and get back to you. But I mean, it's just when my house is quiet and I feel like my brain works better in the morning. I don't know. Do you write in the morning?
Me too. Yes. I really prefer to get it done on the earlier side of the day, unless I'm just jamming on something, but it's like, it used to be that my daughter would go to school and that would be when I do it. But now obviously she's not leaving, so she's home. And so that's a little bit challenging because we're both, I'm trying to work and she's needs my help every 5 minutes. So we're working that out, but I do like to.
No, that's where I am.
I do like the mornings. But tell me how the novel, because you were in a novel writing workshop too. So can you tell us a little bit about like how that helped you with your novel?
So, I mean, I basically, I knew I wanted to write a novel, and I knew I also just wanted to learn more about writing. I didn't have my MFA at the time. And I was just starting to get really serious about writing. I had been waking up for years early in the morning and writing, but I was kind of ready to like take it to the next level. And so I enrolled in a novel writing workshop through Virginia Commonwealth University, which is where I ultimately did get my MFA. And I just asked, like, if I submit a writing sample, can I take this class, and they said yes, which it like changed my whole life. But so I was in there with graduate students, but I was not actually an official graduate student at that time. And the class was set up, it was a 2-semester novel writing workshop. So the expectation was you would take both semesters. It was led by this wonderful professor named Tom DeHaven, who is also an amazing novelist. And he just basically set the expectation that you would write a novel that year, I mean, that going in, he was very clear about that. And so I just kind of believed him, like I was like, okay, yep, that's why I'm here. I'm going to write a novel. Okay. And of course the reality was I didn't have a whole novel at the end of the year. I had 150 pages or something, but it was still like, it was so nice to have someone believe that whole year that you could do it, do something that at the outset seems really impossible. And then also I was getting really good feedback in the class. So, and the feedback is so important, it just helps so much to have someone saying like, yes, keep going on this. Like, you're not wasting your time, So I just loved the experience. And there were really times where people in the workshop had a tremendous hand in the book, where I don't think necessarily you make radically different decisions in workshop than you would normally, but I do think that they can stop you from going down a rabbit hole that you would waste 6 months on. Like you ultimately might figure out that you can't write the whole novel in second person or whatever you thought you were going to do. But they can help you figure that out much faster. So it was a great experience for me.
And then then you went back and applied to the.
So the whole timeline trajectory. That by the time I was done the novel writing workshop, I had officially applied to the program. I thought, I've got these 6 credits. I might as well get 42 more, And so I was taking the classes just one at a time while I was working on the novel. And because I was a working mom, like that was about all I could handle, was one class at a time. And then so I did that for a few years while I was finishing the novel and then shopping it around and, after it sold. And then this past year, I did go full-time. I quit my job and I went full-time to graduate school just so I could finish it up and not be taking one class a semester for the rest of my days, which is what I was going to be doing.
So that would probably take a pretty long time.
Yeah.
You did it that way. And through all that, isn't there a connection to how you found your agent?
Yes, you have done so much research.
Oh yes, I told you I like the research process.
There you go. So my agent actually graduated from my graduate program, and he graduated about 5 or 6 years before me, maybe. I keep saying this in interviews, and I keep saying 5 or 6. I should just ask him one day, what year did you graduate? So
maybe.
But anyway, Chad Lugal is his name, and he's at Janko and Nesbitt. And so I was just like in this super lucky position of being in this novel writing workshop. My professor was just a gem and like loved what I was doing. And I remember like he came back in the fall, like I'd only been working for a month or 2 on it or something. And he was like, oh, I was at Chad's wedding and I told him all about your book. And, and I'm like, what? He's getting married? Like, he doesn't need to worry about my book.
Right.
My non-book, like it wasn't a book. It was like pages, but he was so sweet and he kept in touch. And I, by the time I was getting close to being done, Chad was asking to see it, because he'd heard such good things. So it was just like a really lovely position to be in. I mean, I really find when I talk to writers and just kind of the more I learn about the publishing process, I think finding the agent is the hardest part, And I just think it's so tough out there. I mean, all the way around. So I felt really lucky to have that connection. And it's also just really fun because Chad has a really good sense of where I come from because he lived in Richmond and he went to this program.
Wow. Oh, he lived there. You're right, because he went to the program.
So anyway, it's just been a fun
I love that. So the book, the title, I know the answer to this already, but I'm curious if it's always been the title or if it changed.
So I came to the title probably about halfway through drafting the book. And I can remember going on a road trip with my husband and I had like my phone out and like notepad or whatever. And we're like writing titles in as he's driving, trying to figure one out. But I had kind of come to the title pretty early on in the writing process. And then we kind of like hold it up against other titles as I thought of other things and nothing really could kind of compare. And then at every step in the process, as you know, when you're publishing a book, like a title can always be ripped away from you, right? Like if you can think it's amazing and like your agent can tell you, no, that's not what you're going to go out with it as, or your editor can tell you, not happening, or
it's never safe. It's never safe until like the very last.
Right. And so I knew that. So I kept waiting for someone to be like, and I got to talk to you about this title. But at every step along the way, people were just like, I love the title. I love the title.
Mm-hmm.
So it stayed. It never got touched. There was never even a conversation of like, let's brainstorm other ones. People just liked it, and that was it.
I love it.
I don't know
And
if
then
we'll
there's
have success next time around.
Well, you might. I mean, it's a good title, and there are a lot of titles with people's names in them, and that kind of came up in the last few years. But I love that. I love that. I can still.
It's like we all got the idea the same day. You know, we're like, okay. And for me, I was trying to avoid, I think, the trend, which had been the previous cover trend of like the phrases. Like sometimes the phrases get complicated and I can't remember. I'll be like, that book I loved with that phrase. What was that phrase? You know? So I was really dedicated to like having a noun, and like a proper noun seemed like very memorable. And, you know, so I had these kind of parameters that I was working around, but I was working around those parameters, and then every other writer on the planet was also working around those.
But it works, and it does not. I don't think readers mind at all if there's a lot of different first and last names on different books.
Right.
I like it personally, and I was in a Barnes and Noble. Sorry, Julie. It was all that was there, and I needed a scrap. I needed like something. Non-book related.
You needed a little kid's toy or something.
Yes, I think it was not a book. Maybe I was getting coffee. That's what it was. I was getting coffee. She says that's okay in the chat. But I saw your book. It was on like a display, and the first thing that caught my eye, this is a true story. I didn't even put the connection in that you were going to be on this Zoom with us at the time. And what caught my eye first was the cover. So I'm curious if you had any involvement with that or not, or how the cover came to be.
Yeah. So the cover is, well, thank you for thinking it's beautiful. I also think it's beautiful. It was really kind of fun. The artist who did, I mean, obviously they're like art directors and lovely, brilliant people at Simon & Schuster, but this part here with the girl, this was done by an artist who's out in Portland, Oregon, named Lisa Golightly. And if you follow her, she's got a really beautiful Instagram account. She does these paintings that are very, they're like paintings of old photographs. Like they just have this very nostalgic feel to them. And I remember following her years ago when I was still writing the book, and seeing her stuff and going like, that's what my book feels like. Like, you know, just I would see her beach scenes and I would think like, that's the feel of my book. And so at one point after the book sold, I sent a link of Lisa's work, like on Instagram, to my agent. And I was just like, doesn't this feel like her, like the book? And he was like, Rachel, simmer, you have no control over your book. Like your book cover, don't even like think about your book cover. And I was like, yeah, I know. Like, I know, I'm just showing you. Like, that's all I'm doing. And so then probably 6 months later or something, when Simon & Schuster was like ready to actually work on the cover, they sent me an email and they were like, we were thinking about using Lisa Golightly. And I was like,
oh my gosh. That's crazy.
I think my agent was working behind the scenes.
Oh, you think so?
I
wanted to believe it just happened.
Wouldn't it be fate?
The universe.
I mean, I think probably. I think it just dropped a little something. It was like,
hey, and then they're like, and right. I love it. It's a great cover. It's a great title. So everything is working. What advice, we talked a little bit about, you decided to try to take, to ask if you could take just a class within this program and then later applied to it. But what is your advice? Like, is that something you think an aspiring writer should do? Or what would you say if they have a book in them, but they don't quite have it where it needs to be? What would you say they should do?
I think MFAs are great, like up to maybe a certain age. Like I was the oldest person in my MFA program. And I wore that badge proudly. I was in my late 30s and when I graduated, and like, I think like the classroom actually is better when you have like a range of ages and
Yes.
life experiences. And, but you do kind of like reach a point of diminishing returns in terms of like, are you going to teach with the degree? Are you going to,
Right.
the degree is there in part to help writers get into the classroom to teach creative writing.
I see.
But that being said, there are also a lot of non-traditional creative writing MFAs now where you can do them on the weekends, or you can do them part-time, or you can do, there's a lot of stuff out there. So I went into it just thinking like, I want to improve my writing, and however I improve my writing, like that's great. And I had gone to some of the summer conferences and, the other ways that you can kind of get these like little intensives. And that was part of what told me that I thought I really would like an MFA program was doing that, doing those and seeing like, I just genuinely do like being in the classroom and learning more about writing.
Right.
So I gained a lot out of it, and I would highly recommend doing an MFA. But I also think there are ways to get that experience. Right. You're just like, I cannot do an MFA. Like,
if they don't have the time, or or it's not the right time.
And I mean, I think for me, the biggest thing that an MFA teaches you, and the biggest thing you can also teach yourself, is just that you have to write regularly. Like, that's the key, right? So unfortunately,
stick to it. Right.
I wish little writing elf would come every night.
Yes, that would be nice. Like, here's the idea, and I'm gonna go to bed, and you work on this, and I'll talk to you in the morning when you've got 2,000 words down for me.
Right.
So, I'm sure you've answered this a ton, but I'm always curious. How has the pandemic been for you in terms of having your book published, and it's especially as a debut author?
Yeah. I mean, I really I think that overall it's been good for me to be a debut in a global pandemic as opposed to someone on my third book, because if I am missing a lot, I do not know I am missing a lot.
Right.
And so I hope that I will just continue to live in blissful ignorance until I am publishing my third book. And then Lisa, you and I will be getting drinks one day, and I'll be like, damn, I realized I missed a lot. And you'll be like, yeah.
Yeah. But right now, this is the best. You don't need anything else. That's what I'll tell you right now. This is all good.
Yeah. I mean, the spring was rough because of course we were all super scared and there was so much going on. And then like every week or two, I'd get an email that was like, JK, book tour's canceled, or JK, this is, bit by bit, like stuff unraveled. And you saw it coming. You kind of knew. But of course, I had a July publication date. So back in March, we all were thinking like, oh, well, this will just be a couple weeks. And then
remember those days? Remember that?
Right.
Back when we thought that. Well, it's been awesome talking with you. And why don't you tell us where we can find you online or on social media if we want to learn more about you?
I think I'm probably most fun over on Instagram. I'm the least fun on Twitter. So like if you find me there, you'll be waiting a really long time.
We have that in common. Yeah.
But yeah, find me on Instagram, and then my website.
What's your Instagram name?
It's just Rachel Beanland. If your name is Rachel Beanland, you can get any social media platform you want.
Oh, nice.
Not a problem. I get my handles, no problem. So yeah, Rachel Beanland on Instagram, and then my website's rachelbeanland.com.
Okay, awesome. Well,
before we go too quick, though, I just see that Holly has a quick question, so let's.
Sorry,
let's just ask that real quick before we close it completely out. Do you want? I can go with it.
Let me see.
Yep,
I see it here. You want to ask it, Julie?
Sure. So Holly, thank you as always for all your great questions. But she wants to know, while writing the book, did you find that the conversation around pregnancy and/or at-risk pregnancies and miscarriages has changed much since the 1930s?
That is a really good question. I definitely had to do a lot of like historic research on pregnancy and all the risk factors related with prematurity and all of that stuff, because I didn't have a good enough handle on it in modern day. All three of my children are adopted. So like, I'm not the person. I would have to research just a regular old pregnancy set in 2020, like extensively. But and in fact, one time I can remember Googling, what does a contraction feel like? Or I have to Google these things. So, so I definitely was researching pregnancy, but I was also just researching like hospital practices. And I mean, there was so much going on. Women really in that era had just started moving to having babies in hospitals. And, you know, in fact, in my book, Fanny delivered her first daughter at home and these subsequent children in the hospital. And that was very in keeping with the time, because that was really right around when people, you know, changed that up. And really initially when they were moving into hospitals, they thought they seemed cleaner. But the reality, of course, was that they were not hygienic, and people were probably at greater risk having a baby in the hospital than out of it. But I specifically was interested, and Holly, if you end up reading the book, you'll find that there's some stuff about incubators. There's an incubator exhibit in Atlantic City, and that kind of plays a role in the book. And so incubators in particular became something that I became really fascinated with as I did my research.
Oh, super interesting. Okay, sorry. So we were closing up, and then I threw that one in. But
Sorry,
I think
Holly,
it was a good one. Yeah.
And they're always better. They're always better from you guys. So they're always better questions. So I'm glad we got that one in.
No, Lisa, you do great questions, because it's always a great conversation. So you asked Rachel how we find her on social media. How do people find you and Liz on social media?
Yeah, we're at lizandlisa.com, or at Lisa and Liz on Instagram, and at Liz and Lisa on Twitter. And Liz Fenton and Lisa Steinke on Facebook. I know. Just go to lizandlisa.com, and then you can get all the links over there.
Yeah. And, you know, I forgot to say this earlier for those that are new to this. We wouldn't be doing all of these virtual events if it wasn't for Liz and Lisa prodding Warwicks to do this. And we jumped on the bandwagon early on the virtual world, and we're so glad that we did. So thank you to Lisa and Liz for giving us that push, because it's really been a lot of fun being able to raise up as many voices as we can during this crazy COVID time.
And I know authors are very appreciative of it.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So Rachel, in a normal world, we hope to have you for your next book or paperback or something come to California.
I cross my fingers.
Yep.
I need to write my second slow enough that we can be sure the pandemic is behind us.
If nothing else, we'll all go out for a drink somewhere, right?
Yes.
Right.
All right, everybody. Anybody have any last words? Or are we ready to sign off?
I think we're good. All right, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks
guys.
for coming.
Thanks,
Bye.
everybody. Thanks, everybody. It was a great evening.